I gotta tell you, that was the best romantic comedy I have seen in a long time. I'm sorry, what? That was a comic book movie? Were we not past this? Didn't we learn from Green Lantern, Daredevil, and X-Men 3? We are now in a post-Dark Knight, post-Avengers, and recently post-Winter Soldier world, and we should be taking from the great examples that those writers and filmmakers have set. Or look at some of the other great examples of science fiction works written by guys like Alex Kurtzman and Roberto Orci, works like Star Trek or Fringe. I mean, the writers of Amazing Spider-Man 2, they can learn a lot from those two. Let me just look these guys up. That's right, you can learn a lot from Kurtzman and Orci, Mr. Kurtzman and Orci. Well, maybe Amazing Spider-Man 2 was a rare miss, because Kurtzman and Orci have also written Transformers, Mission Impossible 3, Cowboys and Aliens. Oh crap, there's a theme. I'm starting to think Star Trek and Fringe was maybe a rare hit. Well, let's focus on the good of director Marc Webb's Amazing Spider-Man films. In the first Amazing Spider-Man, I praised Andrew Garfield for his performance, for his awkward, charming, and realistic portrayal of what a teenaged hero would have to go through. In the sequel, it's no different, and Marc Webb has created some real moments of emotional connection, much like he did in his 500 Days of Summer. The best moments in Amazing Spider-Man 2 were the bond between Aunt May and Peter, the romance between Gwen and Peter, and the friendship between Harry and Peter. Once again, Garfield and Stone are brilliant together, and you get to see a little bit of the journey that Peter has to take and the fact that he has to grow up a little. Although apparently growing up meant you went from 17 in the first film to 37. Yeah, Garfield's not fooling anybody anymore. While I do praise Webb for those character-driven parts and building up those connections, they did go on far too long for a comic book movie. And while he may be a great romantic comedy director, he is not a strong comic book film director. Of course, I don't blame Webb completely. This was a team effort, from the writers to the special effects to even the musical composition. Don't believe me? Sad but true, and I can prove it. How? By comparing it to lesser comic book films. Since the hero was excellent, let's take a look at one of our main villains, Dr. Manhattan. I mean Electro. I'll skip the obvious visual comparison between Dr. Manhattan and Electro. It happened to work for Electro, but even his teleportation technique seemed to be stripped directly from Watchmen. It would also seem that the filmmakers of Amazing Spider-Man 2 happened to take inspiration from Schumacher's Batman. Do you remember Arnold Schwarzenegger's great one-liners like, "What killed the dinosaurs? The Ice Age!" Well, Electro had his immortal, "It's my birthday, and it's time to light my candles." I'm not making that up. Electro is even obsessed with our hero, so when he's suddenly disappointed by Spider-Man, it takes a dark and dangerous turn. Remember Riddler in Batman Forever? If you can get past the awful comparisons, the been there, done that factor, well, even the exciting new things in Amazing Spider-Man 2 begin to become too much. In the first Amazing Spider-Man, I even dissected the musical score because at times it seemed so random and almost comical. Thank God James Horner didn't come back for the music in the sequel. Instead, we got the brilliant Hans Zimmer and this lovely young Canadian Mountie. Since we're on the subject, the music was a perfect example of the filmmakers trying new things. New things that didn't work. Now, I praise Webb and his filmmaking team for clearly trying to separate themselves from the Sam Raimi franchise, but some of their attempts at creativity did not work for me. Electro's theme specifically had this bizarre whispering in the background, and while at first it was interesting, it really began to grate me. In fact, the further in we got to the film, the more I heard voices.
Go get it, Twix, go get it, Twix, go get it, Twix.
Wait, no, the other voices.
They lied to you, this movie's crap, go and get your money back.
One thing that almost made this film worthwhile, almost, was the performance of at least two of the antagonists, Comfior and Dane DeHaan. DeHaan specifically, who has already had a great young career with Lawless and Chronicle, turns in a dark and disturbing yet very layered performance. Although the bond with Peter and the transformation into the Green Goblin I felt at times was rushed, Harry was really the one character that when he was on screen, you couldn't take your eyes off of it. Considering the strength of the performances by the leads like Stone and Garfield, DeHaan did an amazing job to stick out in a short amount of time, and I can't wait to see him in future performances. As long as it's not in an Amazing Spider-Man film. He is Amazing Spider-Man 2's for the win. I was on the fence about the first Amazing Spider-Man, and as a result, I gave it the first ever Earn It barely. And I feel, real schoolers, I did you a disservice. Not this time. I have had enough of subpar, over-the-top, and campy comic book films. I get it, Spider-Man is brighter, more fun, and free-spirited than most heroes, but you still have to treat the character and the audience with respect. This is really a case of two separate films. Webb shows us how brilliant he can be at making comedic and dramatic connections, but when it comes to comic book movies, he needs a lot of work. I don't know how many more times I can say it, but I hope he goes back to making films like 500 Days of Summer. His amazing Spider-Man films, however, are anything but amazing, and the sequel is a burn it. Sad to say, it is one of the worst comic book films I have seen in the 21st century. Poll question, continuing the theme, what is your least favorite comic book film? As always, leave your answers in the comments section below. But until next time, school's out.